you mentioned the 2010 incident in Istanbul,
Yeah.
and you have a pretty interesting dynamics between your drivers, and there's I guess a bit more tension than between at other teams in the past. And Seb has arguably been more successful recently, and I'm surprised every year when I hear that you keep renewing the contract with Mark. Is he really the best counterpart to Seb, or McLaren now signed a young driver, also given the age? Is Mark the best counterpart to Seb?
We got two drivers obviously within the team, and you have to have the right dynamics within a team. And you know, Sebastian is 25, Mark is 36, so they're two drivers that are at different stages in their life, at different stages in their development. And 2010 for sure was a big challenge. Sebastian had come into the team, and you know, he was a young upstart. He was a product of the Red Bull Junior team. And Mark, you know, after recovering from a nasty accident, you know, breaking his leg at the end of 2008, got himself back in great shape, and he saw that as his chance to go for the championship. And then within a team, you've got the conflict of the drivers, you know, their selfishness going for a drivers' championship, but the big thing for the team is the constructors, because that's how we measure ourselves against, you know, our opponents, and that's where the money is distributed based on the constructors. So it was tough to manage that, and their relationship for sure, you know, was damaged through that year, where, you know, they are actively taking points off each other, you know, racing each other hard. And you know, there were some difficult moments that year, but you know, one has to come out on top, and Sebastian, you know, managed to achieve that at the end of 2010. And 2011 was a tough year for Mark. You know, there was a change in tyres, change in regulations. I think he'd lost his mojo after the end of 2010, and very much played second fiddle during 2011. But he then got that back, and you know, he's a typical Australian. He's very dogmatic. He's very determined, and you know, he fought his way back into it, and you know, he drove a very good campaign, particularly in the first half of 2012. And as a dynamic between the two guys, it's now very strong. There is a mutual respect there. You know, Mark can't you know, take away that Sebastian has won 3 world championships, and he is the benchmark. And you know, Mark is in a tough position because he's being measured against that benchmark. But the dynamics in the team, you know, they work in that they both get the same equipment, and the number one driver is the driver that's doing the best job on the track. That is human nature, is that you know, you lean towards that driver at that point in time. They both know they get an equal chance, an equal opportunity. It's both vitally important for the team that they're both scoring good points, and as a combination they've been together now, this is their 5th year, and you know, they've won or they've helped us win 3 consecutive Constructors' World Championships. So you know, yes, theoretically maybe we could have taken Lewis Hamilton, but then the dynamics that you would potentially have within a team, a Sebastian Vettel and a Lewis Hamilton, would be truly explosive. And I'd much rather he was at Mercedes.
Do you think that Lewis Hamilton's move to a Mercedes was a career mistake, and can you see a point in the future where Red Bull would be interested in signing Lewis Hamilton?
Well, first of all, Lewis is a wonderfully gifted racing driver. He's got great natural ability. He's tremendously fast. He has led a life that is extremely different to many of his peers, in that he was picked up from an early age. He was taken out of education. He had his own tutor that travelled with him whilst he was racing, and he was groomed by McLaren through the lower formulae, and then he arrived in Formula One, and he's almost had to do his growing up in public, which has been a bit uncomfortable for him perhaps at times. But he's a very gifted driver, and I think he just felt oppressed with the environment. It was almost like a youngster wanting to leave home. You know, he'd outgrown the control and the way that, you know, things were for him in his team at McLaren, and he was very keen to take on a new challenge. He's taken on a big challenge in going to Mercedes, but you know, he feels it's obviously the right motivation for him. Only time will tell whether that's the right choice. It's so hard to sit here and say, you know, if you look at it based on what Mercedes have achieved in the last 3 years, you'd say, you know, it was a mistake. But you know, that's the good thing about this sport, is things can change and change very quickly, and I'm sure he'll be looking to make some changes there. In the future, would he be a driver that we would look at? You know, of course, you couldn't neglect a driver of, you know, of his talent, but we're particularly happy with you know, Sebastian, that we have on a long-term contract, and Mark, that we have for the time being as well.
You talked a little bit about the business environment. Actually, I hear about the environment at Mercedes. Obviously, it's a private team, and being away from this corporate atmosphere a little bit, do your drivers have a little bit more freedom from perhaps the sponsorship requirements? Perhaps, and are you able to shield them from that a little bit as well?
Yes, in many respects they do have more freedom. As Red Bull, we've always been keen to give them freedom of speech, to speak their mind, and sometimes that's bitten back you know, quite badly. But we don't want vanilla athletes. You know, they have their own personalities. They've both got very strong personalities, and I think it's important for them to be able to express that. Of course, the corporate side of the business, with the amount of money that's involved in the sport, and you know, we've taken on many new sponsors over the last few years. Of course, there is demands on their time, but again, we've worked very hard to make the demands on their time fun. And of course, with a team like Red Bull, some of those activities, you know, are fun. Whether that's driving on an ice lake or whatever, it's not standing in a showroom, you know, selling you know, motor cars. They represent the brand that is Red Bull, and it's important that they enjoy that and they don't feel that is a chore. And of course, it's important that we also treat them like athletes, because they are. The amount of training that they have to go through, the diets, the discipline that they have to have in their life is also, you know, extremely important. So we try and make sure that there is that balance, and ultimately it is enjoyable.
Hi. I was just wondering if you'd give us an insight into an aspect of Formula 1 we don't normally get to see. Your relationship with the characters of other characters in Formula 1, such as the wonderful Eddie Jordan.
Ah, Eddie Jordan. Yeah, no, he can make life interesting, because he, you know, he's usually wielding a microphone, and you know there's about 5 million people that are watching, and he'll ask you the most annoying question or the most stupid question that he can possibly think of. And what is particularly amusing about Eddie is, when he ran a team, he played every trick in the book that there possibly was. Now he's obviously holier than thou, and extremely judgmental. But I think he's good for the casual viewer. He asks the kind of annoying questions that others want to hear. And I think the combination of him and David Coulthard and Jake Humphries actually worked tremendously well, because it brought a whole new audience of fans into the sport. The fact that he's got particularly bad dress sense, you know, is just a side issue.
Hi. With so much success of a Formula 1 team coming from how good the car is, how important do you think the role of the driver is now? For example, could you take a driver from a less successful team, put them in the Red Bull car, and achieve the same success that you've got at the moment?
Well, we had 2 drivers last year, and one finished first and the other finished 4th or 5th, I think. And so the driver is a critical element, but it's how it works as a package. And you know, the best drivers, you know, rise to the top, and I think Formula 1 has got a halcyon period at the moment with you know, for sure, with Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso, Sebastian Vettel, Jenson Button. Who else have we got? Mark Webber, obviously. You know, there's Kimi Raikkonen. You know, there's some truly great drivers that are out there at the moment, and the driver will always play a key role. Now, he can't, unlike in other sports, if you play golf or tennis, then it's you, your timing, the racket and the ball. The equipment isn't everything, whereas the equipment in Formula One is an integral part of a success. But you know, so is the driver, and so both rely on each other.
When there are 2 or 3 weeks during the races, how the drivers prepare for the races? Do they come often to the factory to Milton Keynes, or how is the normal week for a driver?
The normal week for a driver, well, there's an awful lot of training involved. I think they'll train for about 4 or 5 hours per day, 6 days a week. So they have to be athletes. Sebastian, who lives in Switzerland, we will see him before each race, because he'll come and drive on the simulator, and Mark will also you know, do that as well. So both drivers at least one day in the factory before each Grand Prix. Now, the driver in the loop simulator it's a virtual world, because we're not allowed to run the car, to test the car outside of the races. We have developed in-house our own simulator that correlates fantastically well with the track. So you know, the drivers will be in probably this week in preparation for the Barcelona test next week. They will be testing in the virtual world some of the updates that they'll be testing next week. And the correlation is such is that we can develop our car based around their findings within the simulator. And so they have a lot of activities, or they have a pressure to deliver for us in that respect. And then both drivers will have other marketing you know, requirements as well. We try to keep to a minimum. Maybe they'll have 2 a month, you know, 1 to 2 a month that they will need to do. But certainly for the whole of January is the 1 month we don't expect to see them at all. They've both been away. I think Mark was in Lanzarote on a training camp there. Sebastian's been training, you know, in Switzerland, because they have to come in on their weight, and that is the one time of year that they get to really, you know, build themselves. And then throughout the rest of the season, it's really maintenance in terms of their physical preparation. But the hard training is all done, you know, pre-season in January.